Welcome everyone to the NextCycle Washington Circular Economy Accelerator launch webinar. We're glad you could join us today. I am Emrad from RS. I am your technology host. I will be sharing some URLs in the chat and handling some housekeeping issues from you today. So please feel free to be watching that chat box for those URLs. You can link off to see different content and materials that we'll share throughout. First couple of housekeeping issues. All attendees are muted, so we can't hear you, but we definitely want to hear from you. Please use the Q&A panel to submit questions. So just to reinforce that, not the chat box, but the Q&A box. So if you click on Q&A, you will see that you have the ability to submit a question to our panelists. This keeps them nice and organized. So once we get to the Q&A session a little later, we will be able to queue up those questions and get some answers for you. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on YouTube within the next few days. We'll be sure to share out a link to all of the registrants. And now I'd like to welcome our speakers, but first and foremost, welcome our moderator, Elizabeth Stark from Stark Consulting. I will hand it off to Elizabeth. Thanks for hosting for us.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome you all and thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited about this NextCycle Washington project and to really see this circular track take off and that the applications have gone live. So we're so excited to get to talk with you throughout this process and really to share this whole project with you. So I'm really excited about our panel today to explain this whole process. We have Emily Coleman with King County Solid Waste, who will be speaking from the government side of things. Then Bryce Hesterman, who is the project manager for this NextCycle Washington project, as well as the track lead for the downstream project. And then we have Kamal Patel, who has just been so instrumental in the really deep and important co-design work that has really guided this process and really bringing that equity spotlight to this work, and just to ensure that we have a just and equitable process throughout. Also not shown here right now, we do have Kara Stewart from Ecology and also Christy Chow from Cascadia Consulting Group. So Kara will answer any questions that come up that is from the ecology side of things. And then Christy Chow and I are co-leads for the upstream track for this project. So Christy will be available at the end for the Q&A session for any questions about the upstream track. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to, oh, never mind. I'm going to talk about the agenda. So we're going to have Emily kind of frame this work for us and really talk about how we got here, really with King County leading the charge and bringing this great work to the state of Washington. And then Kamal is going to talk about the circular economy side of things, but really ensuring that it's equitable and just. And then we have Bryce, who will be talking about the whole NextCycle Washington process. And he's talking about the program structure as well as how to apply. And then lastly, we're going to wrap it up with Q&A. And as Emrad said, please use the Q&A function, not the chat, if you have questions. And then some questions we might answer throughout, and then some we'll save for the end for the panel. One thing I also did not add is that I do use she, her pronouns. So that's all that I have to add, and I'm going to hand it off to Emily.
Thank you, Liz. Hi, my name is Emily Coleman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Circular Organics Program Manager for King County Solid Waste Division, and I am going to give some context as to how we got here. So as a county, our journey is rooted in tackling the climate crisis, improving equity, and drastically reducing waste while shifting to a circular economy. And we will go into exactly what we mean by a circular economy a little later in the presentation, so have no fear that you aren't aware of that term yet. So these goals are born out of 3 county initiatives: the Strategic Climate Action Plan, which has frontline recommendations for an equitable circular economy, our county's Equity and Social Justice Plan, and King County Solid Waste Division's RE+ program. That is a roadmap, an upcoming roadmap to how we will reach our zero waste of resources by 2030 goal. So to build out some foundational research on these goals, we were fortunate enough to have the Washington Department of Ecology fund a project of ours to look at circular or equitable circular end markets and what we call a material concierge program and what that could entail. So two big recommendations came out of that work. Those were to use a co-design process and to build out a platform approach to circular economy development, both of which we will go into a little bit more later. But both became central to our work when creating NextCycle Washington. As you can probably guess by the name, this work began in King County, but we were able to expand it to a statewide approach through partnerships with other public entities. Next slide, please. Thank you. Those public partners are the Department of Ecology and its Recycling Development Center, the Department of Commerce, and Seattle Public Utilities. And we are very excited to have this group of partners. And as this entire program is launched and gets really established in the state, we are hoping that more public and private entities join us as partners in this journey. Next slide. You will hear a lot today about how this program will support businesses and organizations, and the companies that are on the screen will be providing a large piece of that support. They are our consultants for this undertaking, and they are Cascadia Consulting, Traversal, RRS, which has launched NextCycle in a couple other states, and last but not least, Start Consulting. So I mentioned earlier that the King County's interests are driven by reducing waste, tackling the climate crisis, and improving equity and social justice. And so I want to bring us back to this because, I think we're often told, or at least I have heard, that action in one of these areas can reduce resources or support for another. There feels like there is a tension between these three priorities, and I believe that tension is artificial, and truly that these priorities intersect a great deal, and NextCycle Washington is a showcase of this. We can reduce what enters our landfills and reduce the need to extract virgin materials, which can create green jobs and opportunities and reduce harmful impact or environmental impacts for BIPOC communities, while ultimately reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving climate outcomes. The more we travel this path, I think the more we will see that these are not separate circles, but they're integral to each other and really inseparable. So with that background and a little bit of context, I will hand it over to Kamal to discuss more about the shift to an equitable circular economy.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everybody. Yes, my name's Kamal. I'm from Traversal Design. I've been on this project since the research phase of trying to understand how do we implement equitable circular economies in Washington State. I'm going to go into a little bit of the how do we de-silo, or at least how we're trying to de-silo in the work we're doing, and give you a few key areas that we're focusing in. So the first area that we're focusing is basically creating shared language. So key piece to de-siloing our efforts is knowing what we're saying. So we're going to start with a circular 101 and just really land on what is circular economy. And then the second piece we're going to talk about to start is doing this transition and de-siloing our movements requires a paradigm shift in how we work and how we think. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So first, what is circular economy? Best way we talk about what is circular economy is what it's not. So the linear economy is our predominant economy. It's 90% of our current world economy. So basically, it's a material economy that takes materials from the earth, makes them into something, uses them, and then eventually throws them out. The circular economy, on the other hand, is a similar model, but instead of throwing them out, we make uses of them. For example, we repair the product, or we reuse it, we recycle it, or we return it. But the main goal is to make it again and to design out waste. So just to land on this finally, in order to kind of shift to this new economic model, which is less than 10% of our current economy, we need a new way to collaborate, a new way to elevate new businesses and new opportunities. Next slide, please. And so this is kind of part of the paradigm shift we've been talking about. Usually the way we work around material management is it tends to be an industrial model. It tends to be centralized mass labor. What we're looking to do is empower more work from an ecosystem perspective. So we're looking at sort of a platform model to help encourage mass participation, inclusive, multi-scalar, and collaboration. And to make this work, to make a collaborative sort of paradigm shift, we need tools to work together. And so that's kind of what I'm going to dig into in the next section. So we were lucky to have King County, Washington State, and City of Seattle support our work and give us time to really bring in community collaboration and engagement right from the beginning. So we called this effort co-design, and we're using a model called co-design. And we brought in multi-sector stakeholders. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. So the main kind of model is we're adding community to a public and private model. NextCycle is usually, from the last few states it's been working in, is usually a public-private model. And now the innovation we're doing in Washington State is bringing community as a third sector to help bridge efforts and also to help build engagement. And the key piece to this to understand is the way we were defining community was laid out by the HEAL Act. So using concepts like underrepresented communities, communities like BIPOC communities, low income, rural communities, and indigenous communities. So we had them come into a room together with public and private stakeholders and had a multi-month co-design session where they understood the concepts of circular economy and NextCycle. Next slide, please. So the main focus area we had these co-designers focus on was a problem statement, in essence, or a question. Why isn't there equitable circular economy, i.e. recycling, reuse, compost, support for organizations and businesses? And so this was really the main focus of the early part of the work we did together. Next slide, please. And so the cross-sector co-designers came together and mapped what they felt the problems were existing regarding inequitable circular economy. And you can see from the sort of mapping exercise we did, co-designers mapped social governance and economic issues much more than industrial and environmental. And so much of the work we did through this process with NextCycle and these public entities was to really look at how do we look at social governance and economic interventions in the work we do together. So that'll come back in a moment. Next slide, please. So in order to integrate social governance and economic areas, we looked at NextCycle, which is a predominantly economic accelerator, circular accelerator, to see how we could nest NextCycle into Washington State's context and conditions. And so we use this blueprint as a way to organize ourselves. So if you go to the next slide. So this is the basic blueprint. So just really quickly, we have someone from the circular economy community coming in and discovering NextCycle. They could go through an application phase. They could apply for a grant or be in the circular accelerator. Eventually, they would go through a selection phase and finally a funding and support phase. And then they would exit the NextCycle program. And the key piece to this is the economic layer. And so the things that were being brought up by co-designers was key to making sure we attended those needs in the accelerator model. On the edges, on the outside of NextCycle, there is also, next slide, please. NextCycle also has a program partnership program and also a collaborative governance program. And from the co-design sessions, we really realized that those social and governance needs can be really elevated in importance in those areas. So a lot of the work we've been doing with co-designers has really been elevating how can we kind of work at the edges of NextCycle and also integrate with it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the governance part at the bottom there, but this is just an overall view of the system, and then Bryce will go in deeper. So these are the 6 strategies that NextCycle co-designers came up, and we're basically making a statement. NextCycle Washington is making circular support for organizations and businesses more equitable through the following strategies. You can do the first 3, please. We use accessible communication formats to reach overlooked audiences, and we use the hashtag to be able to identify it quickly in communications. So that's kind of the circular 101 you've been seeing. We support robust ecosystems of partners to support those doing the work. So that's the partnership program, who's doing that work and how do we elevate their work. We share power with community to increase transparency and accountability. That's the governance program that was at the bottom of that blueprint. And then next 3, please. We improve access to resources for overburdened communities. That's pretty much self-explanatory. We lower barriers to entry to improve applicants' outcomes. And then finally, we support program participants in strengthening local community networks. How do we make sure that businesses that come into the community can actually support the community that's going into? So how do we potentially bridge those efforts in the NextCycle program? And then my last slide, in essence, what we're doing is we're iterating on this model. So we're taking the work that the co-designers did, specifically those priorities and those intervention areas, and we're turning that into the program governance program. So that bottom part of that graphic you saw, of the blueprint you saw. And in essence, the work we're doing is how do we do this work around integrating our work, desiloing our efforts. It's both rewarding and it's challenging. So we're really just moving slowly through that and really just testing and learning as we go. So we're excited to be part of this process. We're excited that we were given so much time to really dive deep into this work, and grateful for being part of this process. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kamal. And I will jump here to talk a little bit more about the NextCycle program itself, and then how you all can engage with the program, primarily through applying, which is what this meeting's all about, but also some other ways to get involved. I do just want to acknowledge how important the co-design process has been, and how really impressed that I've been, that we've all been with Kamal and his partner Ashley's facilitation of the process. And you saw those 6 strategies there. It's our intention to really make those strategies into the work that we're doing. But we also recognize that it's an ongoing process. Our commitment is there, but these paradigm shifts, they take time. And so we're also looking to all of you as you're engaging with the program. If you find that there are other ways that we can make things more accessible, if there's other ways that we can, reduce barriers, if there's other ways that we can share power, we're always open to that, and to iterate that within our program. So with that being said, I'm going to talk about the program itself and where you might fit as an applicant. And so, I want to start with just kind of the basic concept of what NextCycle is. And you'll kind of see the tagline there. It provides mentoring, networking, and access to funding pathways to help circular businesses and projects grow and thrive. And when I say circular businesses and projects, you're kind of thinking of that graphic that Kamal showed up there, where instead of being waste at the end of its useful life, it's share, repair, reuse, recycle. And so the basic model of NextCycle was developed by my firm RRS as a recycling market development strategy to complement a more traditional state grant funding program. And so we did first deploy it in Colorado in 2018, and then in Michigan in 2020. And this is a pretty exciting milestone of really the official launch of the first application in Washington. And there's all this work that's gone into it to really nest it in the conditions in Washington to make it the right fit for the state. So from the perspective of an applicant, there's 2 ways to participate. The top one there, which we're going to talk about mostly about today, is the Circular Accelerator. And so that's the application that's going live today, and it's going to be open through July 15th. And so that is a program designed around this technical support, this business support, this planning around growth to support and advance promising businesses. So these are businesses or projects that are already taking place, at a smaller scale, and they're looking to grow. And through these the services and advice and mentorship of those that are on staff and other subject matter experts within our network, we will help those businesses and projects to grow as they see fit. The other part of this program, which hasn't launched yet and is going to be launching later this year, is what we call the Renew Seed Grant. And so that is some direct funding in addition to earlier startup business support for maybe newer, more innovative ideas and folks that have not been engaged in this space before. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, but really the focus on today is the Circular Accelerator. And so you can, yeah, there we go. So these programs are related to another. So I do want to just, talk about them together just to show like what the Accelerator is and what it isn't. And so the Accelerator, as I mentioned, is on the right side. That's the businesses and projects that have shown early success and they want to grow. Concept is proven to an extent. Pilots are still welcome here in this stage, but we're kind of beyond the research stage for this one. We're beyond feasibility. This is something that has been tested to a degree and it wants to grow. There's no direct funding involved, but part of the programming that we provide is preparing teams to identify and seek larger funding amounts through grants, impact investment, venture capital, or even traditional project finance. And then in contrast is there that Renew Seed Grant that is focused on the earlier stage, may need feasibility testing, lab testing, market validation, smaller scale pilots, and there's some direct funding and early stage support to help get that off the ground. In an ideal world, someone with a new idea comes in and applies for a seed grant, does some early research there, moves on to the accelerator, and then we help them grow from there. So what is this support that I've been speaking of? And so this is direct mentorship and consulting provided primarily by NextCycle staff. So that's the consultants from RRS, from Cascadia, Star Sustainability Consultants, in addition to the network of subject matter experts that we bring together through our governance circles and other partnership program. And so, as consultants, we work every day with businesses and organizations that are seeking to manage materials more effectively, whether it's recycling, reuse, prevention, or product design. And through this program, we put those resources to work on emerging projects and businesses. So the process that it works through is that we start by developing a work plan to kind of outline what we hope to accomplish with the teams that have been accepted into the program over this 6-month programming period. We pair teams with relevant subject matter experts and consultants to help them understand what barriers that you all have with your projects, and then work together to overcome some of those barriers. And so a couple examples that I want to share includes customer identification. It could be site selection and permitting. It could be identifying the right equipment and capital to fund that equipment purchase. It could be revising your cost and revenue model to help you earn more profit margin to propel your business further. It could be testing feedstocks and products, engaging with your community, finding supply partners or early adopters. And I could go on, and those are just some examples that we've done in the past in these other programs. And so the support is provided in a couple of different ways. So there's a 2 to 3 day intensive boot camp, which will take place around November. And then there's also about 15 hours of one-on-one consulting that's provided that's very, specific to a given project. A big focus of the program and deliverable for each team is to develop a pitch deck and then deliver that at a showcase at the end of the program in February. We've found that storytelling is essential to growing your vision and to building a network of support. And so the process itself of developing and delivering this pitch really requires the teams to focus their vision, project their impacts, and determine what they need to make that vision a reality. And so we're kind of working with you throughout the process to get to that point. The program provides the tools and guidance to really effectively tell your story to the right audience, and with the intent to lead to connections with funders and other key project partners. And then, speaking of funding, which is always a barrier for every emerging and growing business and program, while this accelerator doesn't provide direct support, we do work with the teams to understand the circular economy funding landscape and all the different options that are out there, and then help them identify what funding source is right for them. So whether it's a grant like the King County RePlus grant, or perhaps the Department of Commerce Industrial Symbiosis grant, or one of many federal grants that are out there. Or maybe it's a project finance through the Closed Loop Partners Infrastructure Fund, which has below market financing for recycling infrastructure projects of up to $5 million, or even venture capital, angel investment, or other private equity if you're really looking to grow something in that pathway. We have staff that's knowledgeable and connected to these various funding pathways and will help to position you to apply and potentially receive those funding to fit your vision. And then last but not least, I don't want to forget that one of the greatest benefits is that this is a cohort experience. You're going to be participating this with other teams that are going through the same experience with you. And those are relationships, connections that inevitably always bear fruit and really provide value throughout the life of your venture. Here's how we define an upstream project. And so this is a business and project that prevents waste or improves and expands reuse and repair in Washington. I do provide an example here of an upstream type project that we supported in Michigan. This is a company, they have an AI and sensor technology looking at food, food produce at the distributor, at the production level and vertical farms, and at the retail level, and it identifies through biochemical analysis, it identifies spoilage at the very early stages, so they can kind of remove that and preserve the rest of the food. So that actually results in a great degree of food waste prevention. So that's a prevention technology that is a business model that used this program to expand their reach into the U.S. They were operating in Canada at the time. The next is downstream projects, and so this is your more traditional, businesses and projects that improve, innovate, and expand organic material recycling, organic recovery, and composting, digestion, and then end use of those materials. So that's your more traditional kind of recycling market development pathway. An example that we have from Colorado, Direct Polymers, they're a plastic reclaimer. They participated in the program in Colorado to expand. They wanted to develop a couple of new lines. They needed to secure some supply in order to feed that line. And so we helped them with all of that and help them receive funding to finance that. So those are some kind of how we define the upstream and downstream. And so there's two different sides of this accelerator. And so if you have a project that fits anywhere in that spectrum, you are welcome to apply to this. And then there's I'm kind of managing the downstream projects, and Liz and Christy are going to be the lead point person on the upstream projects. And we'll talk more about that in the future. I do just want to, next slide, please. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I do just want to kind of, no pun intended, plant the seed for the Renew Seed grant, because that is going to be coming out later this year, and I want everyone to be aware of that. And so that is, like I said, small grants for early stage project, early stage business support, and then also kind of tapping you into that network. Next slide. A great example is NextTiles, which in Michigan they applied for a seed grant. They used that to do some preliminary testing on using auto textile waste for insulation. They took that testing, went into the accelerator program, did a great job, won the pitch competition, and they're now in conversations with some investors to turn that into reality. So that's kind of how we see the seed grant fitting into the equation. So you guys are all probably here to understand, like, how can I apply for this accelerator program? And so I'm going to talk now about how you can go ahead and do that. So the first place to start is to go to the NextCycle website, where you will see an apply button. That's going to be at the top right of the screen. There, I see the cursor there, focusing on it. And so that's going to take you to a dedicated page on the website, which has some special instructions. The step one there is to download the instructions. And so that's about an 8-page PDF packet that talks about what the program is, what the program isn't, what we're looking for projects, and some ideas project ideas that we've seen in the past. It has all the questions that you're going to see on the application. And then the last page, it has the criteria that we use for selecting those teams. So it's a really great reference document that you should use. That's not where you're going to apply, though. There's actually an online application portal. So once you've kind of read through and understand the kind of the guidelines, then you'll go to an online portal. you will create an account, and then you will start the application there. One thing to note is as you're working on the application, you don't need to do it all in one shot, but you're going to want to save your work as it goes, as you go through it. And so it's something that you can go work on a couple of questions, save, come back to it in a couple of days. There's also opportunities to have collaborators join. And so you'll just want to reach out to us if you want to have multiple people working on the same application. That's something that we'll have to set up on the background. So reach out to one of the track leads through office hours, which we'll show you shortly, or just send an email to nextcyclewa@recycle.com. Once you're in that portal, you'll fill out the application, you'll submit it by July 15th, and then your job is done. And then it's up to us and using the governance circles to review those applications, score them based on our set criteria, and then we're selecting 8 teams focused on upstream projects, 8 teams focused on downstream projects. And so that selection will take place sometime in August, and the programming is going to begin, end of August, early September, and go through February. I want to talk a little bit about eligibility because that's a question that we often get. We have pretty basic eligibility requirements. Essentially, your business or project needs to either be based in Washington or it needs to be expanding to Washington. In other words, this work needs to be focused on Washington. The material is really anything, so we're kind of material agnostic, but it needs to be focused on material that is generated in Washington that would otherwise be wasted, or if you're finding a higher, better use for it. And then for the entities, this is really a business and a project accelerator. So we are looking for businesses, nonprofits, research institutions, tribal governments fit in as well. Local governments, this is not a target for them because there's other programs for local governments. However, we do want to engage local governments as partners, and they're eligible to be joined as a secondary partner if there's more of a private sector lead. And so reach out to us if you have questions around that, but we don't want to leave local governments out. There's just a lot of programs focused on that. And this is really focused more on the business and organization support. Very briefly, here is a framework of how applications will be evaluated. There's a lot more detail and kind of the types of questions that we're asking ourselves on that application package. So spend some time on that because that's how you're going to be judged. But basically those top 4 columns, value proposition, business feasibility, triple bottom line impacts, and project teams, those are kind of the main categories that we're looking at. And in essence, what we're trying to do is balance the holistic impact potential with likelihood of success while centering waste diversion, social equity, and community, and then climate mitigation potential. And so we're trying to balance all of these things, and we have this matrix, and the application is used to evaluate all of that. And so I would definitely spend some time with that and understand that, and ask us any questions that you have as you're filling out the application. Quick timeline here. So today, June 1st, hooray, we're opening the application. It's a big milestone. So feel free to get started. You do have some time though. We're giving 6 weeks to fill this out. So if you are a prospective applicant, start working on it. If you are not an applicant, but you may know someone that is, start spreading the word and tell them about this, and give them the deadlines, and steer them to our website, to our office hours. In August, like I mentioned, is when the cohort is going to be selected. So that's when the evaluation selection process is taking place. And that's the evaluation is taking place by this kind of the governance circles, which are public, private, community voices that are looking at the criteria that we've set out for them. In September, we're going to be onboarding and work plan development. So now we're into the programming phase. November is where that 2 to 3 day boot camp is. We don't have a time exact or place, but we'll be developing that. Ideally, it's going to be in person, but we have opportunities to go virtual if we need to. And then the final piece is that pitch event in February. You'll notice there throughout the programming, that one-on-one consulting, that kind of 15 hours of direct support, that can happen at any point in time through that programming. And so if you have certain deadlines that you want to reach, you need support coming before the boot camp, we can start working on that right at the beginning. If you want to get through the boot camp first and kind of focus that consulting on, towards the end of it, towards preparing the pitch, we'll work with you there as well. So I want to introduce the track leads. And so basically the track leads are the point person for the respective upstream or downstream track. If you have any questions, these are the folks that you want to start with. They can answer the questions that you have, and if not, they can kind of triage that to the rest of the team to get some answers for you. And so you've already seen Liz, and then already heard about Christy Chow with Cascadia Consulting, and Liz obviously with Start Consulting. They are our reuse prevention and repair dream team, and so they've got lots of experience in that space. And so they have they're a great resource. I want you to see these track leads as resources to help you to remove barriers to, have more successful outcomes as you fill out this application. Myself, Bryce Hesterman, I'm the track lead for downstream. I've been doing this for a couple of years in Michigan, so I have some good experience in kind of managing this process overall. And so if you have a downstream project, you have questions, come to me. There's office hour links that you can find on the website. There's office hour links that you can find through the application packet. I believe probably Melissa's putting some office hour links in the chat as well. And so please don't hesitate reaching out to us. And so I do kind of on that same note, I just want to reiterate the support that we have. One of those co-design principles was reducing barriers and creating more opportunities. And so this is the phase where we are here to help you do that. We want you to be successful. And so part of that is providing an accessible experience. We are in the process of working on interpretation and translation services. We are kind of framing it now as kind of an ad hoc on demand. So if you require translation or interpretation services or have any other accessibility needs, reach out to us and we're going to work with you to try to accommodate that. This is an area that is a little bit, that this is new for us. This isn't something that we've had extensively in other next cycles. And so we're going to do our best. This might be something that is going to improve over time, but we want to be there for you and hear what your needs are and do the best that we can to accommodate that. And so the other aspects, like I mentioned, I can't overstate the office hours. I want you to see us as resources. We find that the most successful applicants in other next cycles have benefited from participating in those office hours. So, this is a tool that I want you all to consider using. We talked about the application guidelines, those instructions. Read that thoroughly, especially the criteria. And then I haven't mentioned yet, but there's a resource library that's on the website as well that you'll be able to link to in order to see. There's reports and data that might help you with some of your scoping. There's some resources on business and financial planning. There's resources on policy and regulation, and there's resources on standards, best management practices, et cetera. So you see that resource library, you can incorporate that into your application and help you be more successful. Other ways to get involved. So if you are not an applicant, like I mentioned, there are still a lot of ways that you can participate. Kamal mentioned that partnership program. And so we're always looking for partners. This is an ecosystem platform approach. And so we want to build this culture of collaboration. And so even if you're not an applicant, we want to provide, we want you to feel welcome to use this as a way to kind of share your information, share your skill set, and help those kind of emerging ideas and businesses and projects to grow. And so one way we can do that is help raise awareness and spread the word. So if you have folks in your network that you think might be suitable, pass on information as it comes out. Pass on the links to the application packet. Pass on the links to the office hours. If you have possibilities for presenting at any meetings that you have set up, reach out to us. We're happy to take 10 minutes and talk about the program and explain how it can be a benefit to members of your organization or group or something like that. I mentioned with the local governments, you can become a project partner. If you're in a certain geography and you don't have a particular project yourself, but you're really stoked on this type of work, you can let us know, hey, if there's a project in this zip code, we would love to hear about it and see if we can fit in as a team. We have these resources that are kind of generally very helpful, and we can help this team provide that. On that same note, mentorship and resources, we're happy to kind of tap you in and connect you with these teams. If you have a complementary program, like another type of accelerator or an innovation challenge, let's work together. We can cross communicate. We can build each other up. You know, a high tide raises all ships, and I think that we want to, in that spirit of ecosystem and collaboration, we want to work together. So if you have complementary programs, let us know, and we can talk about strategic partnership. And last but not least, if you are a funder, please reach out to us, and we can kind of get you in our list of potential funding opportunities, help share that information with the teams that are out there, and kind of you can see NextCycle as a source of potential deal flow for your work, and we can help to communicate that. So those are some ways. There's probably other ways to get involved. Main point is just reach out to us, whatever you think, and if you have an idea to be involved. And I think that's about it.
Thank you, Bryce and Kamal and Emily. Thank you all for all this great information. And so it looks like there is some kind of issue with the links that MRAD has been putting into the chat. So we apologize for the technical difficulties. We will be, if you visit the NextCycle page, we will make sure all those links are in there. So thank you all for your patience as we navigate that, or I don't know if there's a way to change the setting while you all are still on the call to maybe resend those links, but thank you all for your patience and for letting us know that that is an issue. So we're going to start our Q&A portion with our panelists, and then also some other folks who are pretty vital to this project as well. And so Bryce, Kamal, Emily, Kara, and Christy, thank you all for joining us. So if you have questions, please make sure you're putting it into the Q&A section, and we will read it from there. So I'm going to start with a question for Kamal, and this is from Brian Allen, who is asking, where can the results of the co-design process be seen by members of the circular economy community? It'd be nice to look at what's on that graphic of sticky notes and what's missing.
Good question. Yeah. So we currently have a dashboard of about, so we have 6 major priority areas, and then we have about 100 tactics. So we are currently in the process of prioritizing them with the governance group that is coming in. So we're gonna right now put it in front of them, have them help us figure out how we should publish it. So I think for now, the first step is we'll share the slide deck and show you the 6 principles. And then I think the next step is we'll publicly share what the priorities were. So that will probably live on the website. So good question. And I think something we still have to solve.
Thank you, Kamal. So Bryce, what resources are available to help prepare my application if I were an applicant, which I'm not eligible, but if I were, what resources are available?
Yeah, so, I think first and foremost, I think I've been hammering this point home, but I think office hours is a great place to start. And, the resource library that we have has really, I think it has really useful information, especially, I kind of come from a downstream focus, but looking at some of the waste characterization, I think is always really helpful to understand, that shows what the gaps are. And so that shows what is being currently put into a hole in the ground that could be otherwise used. And so that's a good starting point for understanding, what materials are available out here for repurposing into something else. And so spend some time looking at those characterization studies. You're going to see, especially if you're interested in, plastics and organics, there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's going to give you some other ideas too. Textiles is big there as well. And then that data is really helpful for kind of framing your case for why your project is filling a gap in Washington. And so I would definitely recommend you looking at those. If you have ideas and want to brainstorm, you can use office hours for that. We're not going to help you write your application, but we can help you think about what resources are going to be best to help you with that. So those are probably ones off the top of my head that I would really point to.
Thank you. This next question could be for Emily, Kara, or Bryce. Let's pick on Emily. What are other regional opportunities for organizations looking to support the circular economy in Washington State?
Thank you, Liz. So I think NextCycle is a great place to start. King County is doing a lot of work in this space by building out some other grant programs. And, as Bryce mentioned, this is supposed to be a pathway to funding. The NextCycle program is a pathway to funding. So we're working on building that funding structure. So once applicants and folks get through the NextCycle program, they'll have grants to apply for. So we did just launch our first round of the RE+ Circular Economy grants. So those are, the application window is concluded, but we're planning on doing those in subsequent years. And we're also looking at having grants for cities for circular economy work and possibly for schools as well. I know that Seattle Public Utilities is also putting out a lot of grants around reuse and their waste-free community grants. And the Department of Commerce is looking at some work around industrial symbiosis, so related in the space. I don't know if Kara, you want to add anything, or if Bryce, you feel like I missed anything?
Yeah, I wouldn't say you missed anything. The work that Commerce is putting together, they have the Industrial Cluster Accelerator program. Stephanie Scott, that's a great, just do a little Googling for that. Those are much, much larger projects. And then our partners at Commerce, Emily already mentioned the Industrial Symbiosis program, but I think that's underway and starting to close. The one thing I would say that's coming, that's not yet in place, is after the bill that passed this last legislative session, there's going to be a lot of focus on organics and food waste recovery, and that'll be coming. We're still putting together the teams that'll work on the food programs here at Ecology, and that does include some grant money, but that's not up and running yet. But we're looking forward to partnering with them on that when it gets going.
Another thing that I might just throw out there, sorry, there is some funding kind of coming down the pipeline through the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And we're still learning about this, but it's going to be coming through the EPA. Those are ones that need to have a public sector or nonprofit as the lead, but that's where some of this partnership could come together. And so that's something that we can explore is kind of, with this big funding package for infrastructure, there are ways, if we get creative and collaborative through partnership, to access some of that funding.
Thank you all. So we have a question from Naomi, who's saying, and I believe this is probably more for Bryce, we may be preparing for a VC fundraise for our patent pending venture. Depending on the timing of our initial revenue generation, would this affect our eligibility?
Let me just look at that one. So the timing, sorry, okay, here we are. Patent pending venture, depending on the timing of our initial revenue generation. Yeah, so I guess it kind of depends on, where exactly you are. Like, have you developed any products, and have you had any market validation? I think the timing is not, it's not so much that we want to see that you've generated revenue, but we want to see that there's been some kind of market validation that's been done so far. And so it could be a really good fit to allow you to have this time to really kind of prepare your pitch for that VC fundraise. And we have folks that are familiar with that process and could really help you. And so I think that's something we just want to talk more specifically about your project. And so I'd suggest reaching out for an office hour to talk specifically about that, and kind of where you've gotten to this point and kind of where you want to go from there.
Thank you, Bryce. Christy, I have a question from Tracy with the Lopez Island Remakery. Tracy says, our projects are small, but would be great for pilot projects from a small community caring about waste and circular economy. We have a proven record, but projects or innovations would be small, but needing funding. What can you tell us about a very small but innovative project? Pardon my reading. Innovative projects with limited people hours to work through your time needs for pitches boot camp. This may be more than our small team would have time for. What can you encourage us on this regard?
Oh, Tracy, that sounds really awesome. Yeah, I mean, it sounds, pardon me, there's some construction going on right now. So if you hear that, But yeah, it sounds really awesome. And I understand limited capacity. I would just encourage, like, if it's a project that you could use more consulting on, again, there are those consulting office hours so that, that will be available to you. And we're happy to jump in and help wherever we can, if you want to move forward with it. So Liz, do you have anything to add?
I would say too, if it's just a small thing, the renew seed grants
Yeah.
might be coming open as well, just for
Wonderful.
smaller projects.
And if I could jump in, she was asking for some examples, so there's definitely been some examples from in Michigan for small teams that have gone through the process. And there's one that I'm working with right now. It's basically she's a one-woman operation that has some part-time employment, and she's looking to really expand, and this is kind of helping her to do that. And so on the one hand, yes, she has to kind of carve out time to work on the bigger picture, but on the other hand, that's she appreciates having the structure to force herself to do that, right? And so if she's always stuck in the day-to-day, it's really hard to grow. And so if you have this structure here with the program that, okay, for these 2 days and then like a couple hours per month, you have to focus on the big picture, and we can help you with that. We've gotten really good feedback that it's a worthy pursuit, even if it is kind of taken away from the day-to-day.
That's great. Thanks for that example, Bryce.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify too, someone had said I'm hearing 2 dates, the 1st through 15th of June for the application, but just heard June 15th as a due date. Just to clarify the application timeline, it's open today, June 1st, and then it is due and final applications by 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on July 15th. So you have a month and a half, about 45 days to get that in. So yeah, so that would be June 1st through July 15th, not through June 15th. Okay, so in the chat, someone had a question that I think would be good to kind of read to the group. So somebody's asking about clarification of upstream projects versus downstream and whether their project would fall under that. So Bryce and Christy, could you kind of talk through our process of kind of how somebody determines what category they fall under, and then to like what happens on our end if something is really a downstream thing that comes through the upstream application side?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Bryce, I'll let you jump in, but just to for some clarification, I did add in the chat, it's a bit of the ways up now, some examples of eligible projects for the upstream track specifically, because I know that we get questions on that. And so there's like a whole list of things that would fall on the upstream side of things. And then to your question, Liz, about whether or not we kind of see something come in and we're like, oh, that might be actually, for instance, if Liz and I are looking at it, we're like, oh, that might be like downstream. Then of course we'll kind of elevate that and let Bryce know we are always in communication.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the main point. There is a question on the application where you choose upstream or downstream, but you're not pigeonholed into that. And I mean, I've worked with projects before that have there's like a design guidance as part of it, and then there's also like a recycling part of it for, they're trying to do design to minimize the amount of materials that auto manufacturers are using in the packaging of engines when they're getting sent around and whatnot. And so honestly, there's an upstream component and a downstream component to that. And so that's an example where we would just want to work together to figure out where the best fit is. And so don't think that you're totally pigeonholed by choosing that selection. We'll work together to find the right place for you.
We have one more question in the chat, and we're going to kind of wrap it up. And I do want to take a quick moment to plug in the office hours. So I know it sounds like people weren't able to get the links, but if you go to nextcyclewashington.com, you can click and directly schedule office hours with both the upstream and downstream track leads and get any, even if you're not sure which session or, which area you should go in, we can still, help get you to the right place and have this, talk through that with you. But Ming says that they have a proven track record for projects on equitable circular economy, but this will be a brand new project. Will this be okay to apply for or for the Renew Seed grant? So could Bryce or Kamal, could you, either of you kind of speak to the differences and kind of where folks should know the differentiations?
I'll leave that to you, Bryce.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, a couple of things there. That's a really great observation and point. I mean, one thing, the programs are not mutually exclusive, and I probably should have mentioned that there is the opportunity that if you are in the accelerator, you can also apply for the seed grant. And so we've kind of talked about this ideal arc where you start with the seed, go to the accelerator, and grow from there. But there's many iterations where it would make sense to apply for a seed grant at the same stage. And so you can see it as a both and so you'd have the opportunity of applying for both. I think it's, the fact that you've run successful projects before is a really good plus. And so I don't think it hurts to apply for the accelerator. I think it's, from my perspective, I think it's probably a both and, because like the fact that you've done successful projects and it's probably in a similar vein, I think that would be eligible for the accelerator. But if it is a new project that has some early startup costs, then there could be some Renew Seed grant benefit as well. So I think that both could be a possibility for you.
Thank you. So we have 2 minutes, and I actually want to call on Kamal if he can, just for a minute, and just so we're kind of ending on, that just transition work and that equity lens and stuff too. And just, if you could kind of share with us your thoughts on kind of how, from all that really wonderful, deep, intentional co-design work that you led into coming into this project, and as we're going into the Circular Accelerator, how can teams that are applying kind of use that framework or something like that as they're going in to ensure that their product or that their projects are really integrating sustainability and just transitions?
It's a great question. I would recommend looking at the Just Transition framework. You can look, I think there's a zine out there, and it shows how resources apply to resource like circulation applies to the Just Transition framework. So that might be one perspective. And I think that's an important one because it really helps you understand, like, how do we zoom out from materials? So I do recommend the Just Transition zine. You can just Google that. Other than that, I mean, yeah, I think that's probably, I think the key thing is that the words we use, make sure that you might have to explain it in different ways sometimes. Sometimes one word might mean something else to somebody else. So really kind of realizing how do we understand words that this application might use? How does that relate to words you're using? So really kind of constantly trying to translate, I think, is a key need.
Thank you so much, Kamal. And just kind of wanted to come full circle with really beautiful work that you and Ashley have done. So thank you all for your time today. We are so excited to get to work with you on this journey and really building a really strong and beautiful circular economy in the state of Washington. Please use this lovely QR code that is in the top of the screen, since we've been having some link issues. All the information you can think of can be found at nextcyclewashington.com. You can find us on LinkedIn. Schedule office hours if you have any question, even if it feels like a small little question or something you're not sure. We want to talk to you about these projects. We're so excited to see how you want to be part of creating this beautiful circular economy. Thank you so much to our panelists. Emily had to hop off, but Emily, Bryce, Kamal, and then Kara and Christy as well for, sharing your expertise with us. And then also Emrad as our technology host. So thank you all. And we look forward to talking to you more about this NextCycle Washington project.